so much of what I've been doing is looking at my own life and trying to understand what are the universal truths or themes that resonate with me and I feel a part of. Because then if you feel like you have a personal connection to it and you can speak from the heart, I mean, that's how you're going to partially convince someone to believe in your project.
You are listening to Talk Doc to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping documentary filmmakers thrive. I'm your host and fellow filmmaker, Leah DeLeon, and today's guest is Cole Sax. Cole is an award-winning filmmaker, development executive, and creative director. He is the head of creative and development at his company Think Less and has produced standout documentary films for brands like YouTube, Google, Chipotle, and the Olympics. Cole is the real deal. He is an incredible writer, meticulous creative, and an overall cool dude. Through his work, he explores today's culture through character-driven storytelling that not only entertains but also connects and inspires. He has directed original and branded documentary teams of all sizes, from 10-member sets to grand 100-person productions across the globe. And today, we are blessed to be able to have a conversation about how to build your dream team for your documentary crew. Welcome, Cole, to the podcast.
Lovely intro. Thanks for making me blush.
Of course. So I want to dive right in. So our goal for today's episode is to better understand how to find, hire, and lead your dream team for your documentary project. And first, I think it's fun to just start a conversation of what does a documentary team look like, and how is your perspective on a documentary team changed over the course of your career?
The team definitely varies depending on the story that you're trying to tell. The thing with documentaries is that, a lot of what you're doing and the stories that you're telling can be very intimate, or they could be not. And so I have always approached, finding the team that's right based on the type of story that we're going to tell. I think it's always nice when the whole crew has an understanding of this is a story and perhaps have an emotional connection. And yeah, it totally just depends. I mean, there was like the Olympic related documentaries that I worked on where we really wanted to bring on people that had a direct tie to it. So like the last feature documentary called World Debut, which told the story of how skateboarding, surfing, and sport climbing made its way into the Olympic Games. I mean, we did hire a good amount of people that participated in those worlds. So whether they did it in a recreational way or perhaps, used to do it in a professional way, they have a connection to it. And then there's been really intimate stories that I've told that have required us to be like a really small, tight-knit team where, just less people and people kind of doubling up on roles. So yeah, totally depends.
Totally depends. I agree. And I like what you said, that it totally depends on the story. And so thinking about once you have your story, what kind of materials do you have in place, or when do you start thinking about what crew members to bring on? What do you typically have before you reach out?
I mean, I think there's like a time to reach out to certain crew members. If I'm developing a documentary project, then I will usually reach out to like a producing partner or someone that I really trust that is willing to help me flesh out the material together. So I'll think about it in a creative way, and then I can rely on someone to think about it in more of like an operational way. So, budget, calendar, a timeline of everything, right? And I'll bring them into the mix sooner. And then once I feel like there's money secured and I'm moving forward, then I'll reach out to other crew members, whether it's like a DP or an editor or things like that. I try not to do the reach out too soon if it's not actually
Fleshed out enough.
Yeah, fleshed out enough, and like I know that this thing is going to at least have some type of financing secured to make it happen. Because I think a lot of times it's easy to get excited, and I've done this so many times where I jump the gun and then I tell them about it, and then it just sometimes doesn't happen, and I'm like, uh, maybe I should have waited a little bit longer.
Right.
Um, I mean, with doc work, you know, I'd love to get like an editor in the mix sooner than later, just because a lot of my background stemmed from editing. Um, until I moved into directing. And I think, editors and doc work are like second directors and they're priceless. So being able to have those early story conversations with an editor of like, hey, this is what I think the story is right now. This is where it could potentially go. And, just kind of like
Even in
workshop.
development, or when do you start thinking about editors?
Yeah. Yeah. Like even in development, sometimes for sure, I'll want to have that early conversation with them. And then once I'll conduct pre-interviews, so just phone calls where I talk to the person that the story is about, and we'll just kind of hash out what we think the story is together. And I'll even have like an editor sit on that call, or I'll,
Hmm.
then share the pre-interview with an editor, and we can talk through it. Because I think so much of doc work really comes down to a fantastic editor, and so having them in the mix, I think early on will you know it'll just save you a lot, and it's like a really key player to help bring in. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I feel like with when you're pitching to production partners, like you mentioned, like maybe someone has never done that before, they don't know how to approach a production partner. What kind of advice do you have in order, like, what do they need to know in order to say, wow, that's a great idea. I want to jump on board, help you flesh it out, help you get financing. Like, what are the questions that you typically get in those like development meetings?
I will say, with like finding the right production partner, I don't think you can go into it assuming that this production partner is going to like make the project happen for you, or they're going to will it into existence. I think you have to be your biggest champion and advocate of the project that you really believe in and care about. And so, if you're going to approach a production partner, I think having a story fleshed out, knowing like what's the subject matter, who's the A character, the B character, C character, things of that nature. And yeah, and just having like a deep understanding that this is the story I want to tell, and I think it's compelling, and I have, like a quality deck or a sizzle, and just material to then approach the production partner and say, like, I would love to have your help with, whether it's securing financing or running payroll or production insurance, or helping crew up, those things, and going in with a specific ask as well. Yeah, I think finding good production partners is really important, because you want a production partner that's gonna believe in the vision that you have, and you as a filmmaker too. Because so many times you can bring it to production partner, and then it can easily just like live and die there. Um, so you have to kind of be relentless in your pursuit of bringing it to life.
Can you give an example of a time where you approach a production partner, they said yes, and then kind of what is the next steps, or like talk through, because each relationship is so different. Like if you can talk through kind of what they offered you, what you offered them, and then how do you go about making sure that the crew is correct for both the production partners and you?
I mean, I would say like the first production partner that I got to work with was Boardwalk Pictures. And they're a really great studio. They've done a lot of really amazing docs, and we're definitely kind of like first in during the doc boom and craze with a lot of the big streaming platforms. And when we went to them, we had this concept called Far From Home, the series, which was kind of a derivative of a feature doc that was made. But it basically was an episodic series that told the story of unlikely winter Olympic hopefuls and their quest to make it to the games. And when I say unlikely, it's just athletes that hail from like non-traditional winter sport countries. When we went to them, like we knew the characters that we wanted to highlight. It was like, Shiva Keshavan, who is a luger from India, and the female Jamaican bobsleigh team, and a Brazilian cross country skier. And we just made sure that there was a strong vision for what the show could be. And so we actually brought it to Boardwalk and Mandalay. Ultimately, Boardwalk really loved the concept, and they had a relationship with someone from the Olympics who just joined that team, and they're kind of heading up original content there. So much of it too is just like right, it's the timing and being at the right place at the right time and this and that, and then conveying like a strong vision for what you want to do. Because I mean, to be frank, like when we went to Boardwalk, it's like we were more or less like first time filmmakers. I mean, we did a project beforehand, um, but they really like believed in us, and I mean, honestly, they're really great people, and they were like, yeah, we will help champion this for you. And then once we pitched it to the Olympics and they were brought on board, Boardwalk really did kind of give us the keys to the car, and they're like, all right, now you guys can go and make it. I mean, I feel grateful for that experience because it's kind of a unique one, because a lot of times the production partner will, they'll try to put they might try to put the filmmaker in a certain box and then take on running all production and post, and which is fair. Like you always have to give away a part of your vision, um, to some degree. So in this case, yeah, we just got lucky, and
Yeah.
maybe they would say that we knew what we were doing and we had a clear vision. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if you resonate with this because I just, again, looking at your website, absorbing your work, following your work, I really feel like you're a great writer. Can you talk about why writing is important for documentaries? And like how do you convey that vision? How do you convince someone that, hey, this is worth a bunch of money. This is worth telling the story to your audience. How do you boil down, someone's story into a treatment to convince a production partner that it's a good idea?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying I'm a good writer. I don't know if I consider myself one, but I think when I don't know, when I'm thinking about the projects that I want to make and the stories I want to tell, I always try to find some humanity in it, like some type of personal connection that I have to the story. And then that way, when I talk about it, I can just speak from the heart. So I think so much of what I've been doing is looking at my own life and trying to understand, you know, what are the what are the universal truths or themes that resonate with me and I feel a part of. Because then if you feel like you have a personal connection to it and you can speak from the heart, I mean, that's how you're going to partially convince someone to believe in your project and your film. I mean, with that first Olympic project, I mean, I was very passionate about it because I saw a lot of these athletes who just didn't have the financial support or the access to what a lot of other people have. And I just really resonated with the whole idea of, not letting circumstances define you. And if you have a vision, march to the beat of your own drum and to like really work through the adversity. So I don't know. I connected with that. And then I think moving forward with a lot of the other projects I've done, I've always just tried to find that universal truth in it. And then, yeah, just like really speak from the heart about it. And then, of course, playing the game and understanding like when do you kind of make things feel and look a little bit sexier, and how do you spruce things up, and what's the entry point into the story. But then again, of course, like the core of it is like speaking from a place that really you feel connected to.
Hmm. I really like what you said, looking at your own life, because I think, at least personally speaking, I've always been drawn to telling other people's stories, right? And it's like, oh, like a common question I get all the time is like, oh, what kind of documentaries do you work on, or what kind of stories do you tell? And I think it's a question that a lot of people maybe struggle with, or they're like, well, I think I like stories about this, or I think this, or you think about like what you're drawn to, but it is, it's interesting to just reflect back on your own life, because like how can you relate to your characters? How can they feel like they can be honest with you? How can you have that shared experience? And it's when you relate to them, whether it's like you're a skateboarder yourself, whether it's, you know, you've dealt with mental health issues, whether it's whatever. So I think that's a really good piece of advice to kind of reflect on your own life, like the own struggles that you have, and see how you can like pull that out of someone and articulate that. I think that's really smart. That's what it's all
Yeah.
about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, that's so much of filmmaking. I never
Mm,
look like there's certain genres that I like, but I always looked at myself as a thematic filmmaker, where it's
mm,
like the genre doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot, although it can at times, and like the subject matter. But for me, it's like what themes exist in the story that I can really relate and connect to. And then, of course, with doc filmmaking too, it's so much about passing the mic to someone else to share and express their story, and you as a filmmaker, like you have tools to help get that story out there. I mean, it really
mm-hmm.
is like a team sport, and it's highly collaborative in that sense. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I like the team sport mentality too. I think um, it's so interesting because a lot of people come together for like one day, like people from all across the world to work on, and maybe it's a 1 day shoot, maybe it's a week shoot, maybe it's months. But how do you view like teamwork? How do you facilitate that as a leader, as the either like director or executive producer, as you're building these teams for different situations? Like how do you make it feel like we're a team?
I think so much of it is like the energy that you're helping facilitate on set. I think a lot of times too, it's kind of like looking in the mirror. I mean, I've directed on sets where honestly, like I've dropped the ball and I've maybe had a shit attitude or got in my head about something. And then a lot of times like either go on a walk or be up late thinking about how the day went. And then, realizing like if I show up with a poor attitude, then it's going to trickle and kind of seep in into the rest of the shoot and the people that are like spending their time working on it. And so I think trying to show up in like lighthearted ways, um, being able to not want so much control of certain outcomes and being more like fluid and flexible with how things transpire. Yeah, like being a good steward of the story, and then understanding that like you have responsibility for other people on set too. So like, just checking in with each person individually when I can, and ask them how they think it's going, and trying to be like a caretaker to some degree in that way. But then, of course, you're trying to find the right people that can also be like fairly self-sufficient. I'm about to do this documentary with an automotive company and a nonprofit group where they like outfit this nonprofit with a bunch of electric vehicles and trucks, etc. And they go into disaster relief zones and provide relief support. So for this, like we would be tracking a hurricane and following the storm in until it hits, and then going into the area, and just embedding ourselves there. But like we're gonna be on the road and like probably sleeping on the side of the road or in a car. You just need to make sure that you have the right people that are down for kind of the grind of whatever the shoot may be. And then of course, so
Setting
then
realistic expectations,
yeah,
right? Like this is going to be a long day, or we might be, stuck in a little corner, or yeah, people that are just down with it.
yeah, setting realistic expectations. And then like you want to, your crew is really important, so taking care of them is really vital. I mean, you want to pay them well with based on the budget that you have, and you want to value their time and and just be like really upfront and transparent and honest about like, what is this? Where are you, like, where is the project at? What's the vision? And doing your best not to like work people into the ground too, because, doc versus commercial can be incredibly different because with doc, I mean, sometimes like you've had a 10 or 12-hour day, but like there's really important story points that are unfolding and it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe you have to check in and kind of read the crew and figure out like who is able to keep going with me. Do I just need to grab a camera and keep going? It's
Mm-hmm.
like it can become tricky.
What kind of types of communication do you do before a shoot typically in an ideal world? Like a pre-production sync, like where you get everyone on board, or like what does that look like for you for, let's say it's like a branded doc. So it's like it's documentary, a little bit of commercial, so maybe you have some clients involved. What kind of pre-production communication are you having with the crew?
When it's a branded documentary, meaning that there's like a brand partner on board and there is some like commercial purposes for it. I think so much of it is like it's just a lot of prep. So me as a director, like working with the producer and really understanding, what can we do with the budget that we have and kind of understanding the sandbox that we're going to be playing in
Mm-hmm.
very early on. And then I'll have pretty in-depth conversations with, the DP and talk about like the visual language and our approach. Are we doing like straight verite observational style documentary filmmaking, or are we going to try to do some like reenactments? And if so, like when are we doing it? When is that going to be scheduled? And then I think so much of it is you're kind of just you're managing a lot of different people. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like weekly calls with the client just to do status updates and then also weekly calls with like your producing team and the DP and making sure that everything is squared away there. Then I think before we leave, like we'll always do a pre-pro meeting, the day before we head out or 2 days before to make sure like everything's buttoned up. And then while we're there on set, it's like we'll do little meetings before we go out, or we'll talk about the day around like a team dinner after we wrap. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, so much of it is just communication. It's like, it's kind of like a marriage, honestly.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
have a marriage with your producing team, and then you have your own little relationships with the rest of the crew, and just constant communication. And because sometimes things get heated and people get
yeah.
upset, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like you have to be able to, especially in the moment, like talk through it. And hopefully you have a team where you can talk through it with them,
Mm-hmm.
and you both or whomever's involved can like kind of work through it and then get back to kind of the task at hand.
Right. I think you bring up a really interesting point and something that I have been trying to schedule in actually for different doc shoots is kind of like scheduled powwows. So, like for example, let's say we've never been to someone's house before and we're just kind of going in blind. It's like, okay, well, and trying to establish that with the character as well, like, hey, we're gonna check out your space, like give us a tour, then we're going to take like 10 minutes to discuss as a film crew. Then we'll come back and talk to you and kind of like, even after the interview wraps, like, okay, great, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to discuss what to do next, or like just building in time to kind of huddle with your team. Because I feel like there's times where maybe you have a really jam packed schedule and there's not time to even think. You're like, oh my God, we got to go to the next location or we got to go do this. But leaving room for adapting and just like talking to one another. Do you do that on your sets? How do you like facilitate like mini powwows like during set?
I would say like that's pretty spot on. I think one thing that you brought up, which is good, is when you're working with like an on-camera talent and someone that perhaps like doesn't have a lot of experience of the process. I mean, just always articulating to them, this is what we're gonna do, or like this is what we're prepping, this is what we're gonna do. Okay, now this is what we're going to do after, and you just have to assume like Yeah, I mean, they don't really perhaps know what's going on and haven't done this before. And it can
Mm-hmm.
be super intimidating for someone to have a lot of new people come in, um, being on camera, and being really vulnerable about their story or, something you're following. Um, so yeah, I mean, that can be intimidating. So I think so much of it with that, yeah, is like making them feel really comfortable. I mean, that's like on all the projects I've worked on, it's always been about, how can I make this person feel as safe as possible
Mm-hmm.
around me and the team and this experience that they're having.
Yeah.
Because, if people feel safe and you're building the trust up, then they're gonna, feel way more comfortable about like revealing these pretty intimate details of their life and their story, which perhaps like they wouldn't necessarily reveal normally in the first place.
Are there any other tips like on production? Like you mentioned like crew dinners. Like I think crew dinners are always great, or even like sometimes with your character to just like get to know them ahead of time. Maybe like the powwows like we talked about. Is there anything else like while you're on production, like little tips that you've realized help keep the energy like good and positive and just like checking in with everyone and making sure that things can still go smoothly for the day?
Cracking jokes, just
Yeah.
like being lighthearted. I think it's so easy to become so serious about what you're doing. And of course, like sometimes the subject matter is incredibly serious and you might be in an environment where like it isn't appropriate to do that. But I think it's reading the room. And I mean, one thing that I always try to do is just like make people feel like they're having a fun time doing what they're doing, and it could be in the form of, simple like kind gestures or checking in or, like making a joke, or maybe it's just like a smile to someone. I think it's about not getting too swept up in like this is the most important thing we've ever done in our life. Like we're still people at the end of the day, and it's a special thing to be like, especially if you're traveling or working on a set with someone. It's, it can be like a really special experience. Um, and you kind of have to like remind yourself of that sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Matt always tells me like you need to take your job very seriously, but you can't take yourself too seriously. And that's something I try and remind myself because I too can get like very serious about stuff. And it's like, guys, like it's fun. We're not like doing surgery on someone's heart, you know? Like we are telling stories and we're having a good time. And the work that we do is important, but it's not like there's not necessarily like a life on the line. And that always like tends to make me relax.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's like going into your shoot uh, and telling your story. I mean, I think like the more prep, the better understanding you can have about what you're trying to tell is only going to make the experience that much better, because it can be really frustrating if, like you do bring people out to a shoot and you really don't know what's going on, or you don't know what type of story you want to tell. And that can like, I mean, that's pretty easy to read, and that makes people feel less confident
Hmm.
about their own participation in it. So I found that, the reason I do so much prep a lot of the times is because I'm like, I want to feel incredibly confident about the story that I'm trying to tell. And if it does change in the moment, I know I have enough knowledge about it to understand like where this fits in. And a lot
Hmm.
of that too comes from, thinking like an editor and trying to like edit the film in your head or however much
Hmm.
you can beforehand, whether it's like
Yeah.
a paper edit from pre-interviews and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are little individual tools.
Okay. I'd like to transition us to talk about your new project, The Crux. Can you tell us what it's about?
This is a documentary series, and we made this film in partnership with Little Monsters, which is Jimmy Chin and Chai's production company. They did like Free Solo and a variety of other amazing films. And we partnered with the North Face and National Geographic on it. So it's there's a really strong team that believes in the sport of climbing, and the stories that we're telling. And I've been really passionate and dedicated to bringing that to life. And essentially, we've just embedded ourselves with different sport climbing athletes and their quest to, at least in this season, to make it to the Paris Olympic Games that are coming up. Yeah, it's an interesting time in sport climbing because, the sport itself used to be this kind of like fringe, kind of dirtbaggy activity. Like you sleep in your van next to the side of a mountain and or wall, and and then you're climbing and you're kind of like, disconnecting from society, and you don't really care about a lot of other things. You just live, breathe, and eat climbing. And now there's a lot of money and uh, brand sponsors and other things that are coming into the sport. And so it's just changing. And there's a lot of young people that are kind of, grappling with the fact that, like, okay, I can possibly make this a career now. So we just really embedded ourselves with them, and we follow them along the competition circuit, and we get to see kind of the drama behind it and why people are doing what they're doing and people trying to achieve their dreams in a really big way. So yeah, that one has been a crazy ride because it started as, an email to the Sport Climbing Federation being like, we have this idea for this follow docu series around your competition. Would you want to do it? It came on board and said yes. And then we went to raise money and got a little bit of money, and then was able to kind of edit a sizzle, which is like a little trailer to help raise more money. And we got more money from our brand sponsor. Yeah, it's been like a project that's been in like a year of making.
How do you balance like creative, because you have a lot of creative people and opinions coming together for the shared vision, but how do you balance like roles and expectations? Like, is it kind of like a long conversation in the beginning of like, this is what your role is, this is what your role is, we kind of like sign here and then continued conversation? Or do you have like milestones throughout? Like, how do you navigate having a brand, the federation also a part of it, your crew members, like there's just a lot of people to kind of keep in the loop about all these decisions? Like, what's like the biggest learning that you had from this series?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one to answer because I think like it's just so much of the work that I've done, like the experience that I've had that has led me into a place like I am today, being able to navigate a lot of different players. And I think the biggest thing is just being like, this is the vision for it. We wanted this show to be on a streaming platform, and we were like, who would be the best partners to bring onto this? And there's no better partner than, Little Monster and the North Face, and, having it be on, being distributed through someone like National Geographic. It's like looking at all the puzzle pieces and trying to understand, like, this is what works to make it fit. Like, it wouldn't make sense for us to go out and find, a true crime production partner to come on
Mm-hmm.
board for this when they don't have a connection to it. And it wouldn't make sense to find, a brand sponsor that has like no connection to the outdoors, or try to take it to like um, a network or a distribution platform that only talks about reality television and like who's marrying
Yeah.
who, you
Working
know?
backwards,
Yeah,
understanding the final step and then seeing who can plug in where.
yeah, yeah. Working backwards, like reverse engineering it for sure. And then I think just like finding the right people to come on board. Like I directed a little bit on it, but we brought on the showrunner and director of Drive to Survive, who did like 5 seasons of it, who really understood what it would take to make a embed show like this. And then, we had a fantastic like EP and producer who really understood what it could, like what it would take, and the milestones, the money required to make it happen. And then we had a great line producer who like really just paid attention to, you know, who we're hiring and how's like the health of the project financially and all these things. Um, and a lot of it is like it's finding the right people that you trust so you no longer have to worry about it and you can kind of like stay in your swimming lane and focus on what you do. Uh, and yeah, and I mean, that is just built through trust at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day.
And
Yeah.
finding people that have a different skill set than you, I think is
Yeah.
something that I'm learning too. It's like, okay, maybe you're drawn to work with a certain person because they think similarly, or maybe even have a similar skill set, but it's actually really great to also know your own your own flaws and ways that you need to improve, and find people that are really great at that and just let them run with it and double down actually on your strengths, not necessarily like figure out my weaknesses and improve on it. Like, what am I really, really good at and stick to that? And then find people that are really, really good at what they're good at, and we can just go in the right direction together.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Love that. Okay, to wrap it up, do you have a book, a podcast, an app, something like recently that you feel like has really helped you in your career, whether it's like mentally as an individual, whether it's like as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, like what is the one recent thing that you've enjoyed and felt like you've gotten some inspiration from?
I mean, there's always some books that come to mind, like Ray Bradbury's Zen and the Art of Writing. I think is a good one. And on directing film, David Mamet, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. Those were really formative books, I think, early on. And then I think so much of what I'm doing nowadays is just going out and trying to like experience life.
Hmm.
Um, and talking to people, like going to a coffee shop and meeting someone new and just like shooting the shit for 2 hours about their life and being curious more than anything, like asking people questions. God gave us like 2 ears and one mouth, so we ought to listen more than we speak, or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of that is like kind of a mantra of how I've tried to approach my own life, my own work, which is yeah, I'm interested in hearing what people have gone through and trying to like break through kind of more surface level conversations. Having those conversations kind of opens up this, pathway of seeing what resonates with me. It's like, little glimmers that you feel, like whether it's in a conversation or in music or in a movie or, you know, in an experience. It's like paying attention to the glimmers that you feel because those can help direct you not only in filmmaking, but, in your life in general. And that can push you in a direction to, in this case, figure out the type of story that you want to tell. Because documentary filmmaking, it can be like, you could be working on a project for years and, feel burnt out and disheartened about what you're doing. And so you need to be able to tap into that, like that glimmer that you feel to kind of give you the energy to, feel the importance of your project and why you even want to do it in the first place. Because if you don't feel that, then you know, it's just not going to work because doc work, I mean, you really have to will it into existence in a big way.
The stamina is real.
Yes, it's a marathon. So yeah, I think more of that. I just honestly, I try to do a lot of stuff that isn't even, or like read and watch and yeah, do things that aren't even related to filmmaking. But that's because like perhaps I've been in film for over a decade now, um, and it's different. But I will say, when I was starting my career, I was very obsessed with the craft, watching movies or Vimeo films and like downloading a short film and then bringing it into Premiere and like cutting the film and seeing where all the cuts are. And
Right.
I've, read those two books I mentioned and I've just listened to podcasts relentlessly. And that really helped me early on to figure out kind of the different tools in the process. And then, the longer you do it, the more just like comfortable you become in your own ability. then you realize that there's a time and place to be obsessed with the craft, and then to just go and like kind of turn it all off and go live life and experience what life has to offer.
Mm.
Because that
That's
I'm at a
important too. That's how you find stories, right? You got to go out and explore. It's not going to be, in a book that you're necessarily going to find your next documentary character.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And then last question is, piece of advice for an emerging doc filmmaker that wants to make a career out of this. I know it's a loaded question, but whatever comes to mind, if you're telling your younger self any advice in today's society, in today's world.
Say yes to opportunity. You know, if you get an opportunity that comes up, it's say go for it. You know, care about what you're doing as well. If you're going to tell a story, then give it your all and don't half-ass it by any means. And then I would say find your community of filmmakers that you can make stuff with. And if you feel like there isn't a community around you, then I think nowadays it's so easy to reach out to people you admire or you watch things, and and just trying to like connect and talk, and you can daydream and think about the type of films you want to make and do that all the time. But there is no substitute for like going out and just starting to make something. A lot of times you're gonna make things that are kind of shitty. Like the first cut's gonna be really bad most of the time, and you might make a project that doesn't hit all the notes, and you can become way too consumed with like, oh, can this get in this festival or get this staff pick or get on this platform and this and that. And it's like, it's easy to get lost in that stuff. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it too. So I think my advice is like, don't even worry about like the prestige of shit. It's just like make something that is undeniably human and makes you like, yeah, just brings out an an emotion in you and other people that is like undeniable. you know like my thing is I really love to make people cry in the films that I
Mm-hmm.
make. So it's like if I watch something I've made and I'm not crying, then I'm like, okay, I need to keep going. And whether it's tweaking music or you know or tweaking the story and this and that. So yeah, that's my blanket advice, I guess.
I wrote it down. Make something undeniably human.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I'm going to write it on a sticky note and put it up.
Boom.
All right. Thank you so much, Cole, for today's episode.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. I'll link all of Cole's links in the description, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.